Hey guys, Dan with Rep Fitness here. Today we are installing the lat low row on our PR 5000. Every step here today is going to be the same for our 4000 also. So if you have a 4000, great. Just follow these steps that I'm about to show you and everything's going to work perfect. We also do, today we're working on our 93-inch PR 5000 lat low row. We do offer an 80-inch also. Again, steps are going to be the same. So one thing I do want to mention, just in case it's kind of hard to tell in the video. See, our logo plate is backwards here. We did turn the rack around, so we are working on the back of the rack, just for video sake. All right, so we got our lat attachment here. This is gonna be all the parts that come in your box. The hardware is all gonna be together in a little blister pack, but I got everything kind of laid out here so you can see it. Got our brackets for the floating pulley, chain, carabiners, bolts, our larger bolts for the frame pieces. Got our pulley wheels, got our front rear base, our rear base, got our trolley for the weight horns, which are here, got our upper pulley support beam, our rear base stabilizer here, 2 cables, front and bottom, and our guide rods here. Tools that we're going to need for this assembly, again, the 36-inch socket that we use to build the rack, adjustable wrench, a size 14, 17, and 19 socket if you have one. If you just have a wrench, that's fine too. A size 6 Allen key, a size 17 wrench, and a ratchet if you're using sockets. We'll get to this at the end, but some silicone spray will also come in handy, and I'll show you guys that in a little bit. So just a tip, before we install the rear base stabilizer, you may need to just loosen these bolts on the logo plate here, just to allow the uprights to space out a little bit so it's easier to line up the holes on the rear base stabilizer. All right, so now that we got the top loosened up, we're gonna go ahead and put this rear base stabilizer on. So we got both of our bolts through, 2 of them. You can do all of them if you want. I'm just gonna do 2 for now. And we're gonna go flat washer, lock washer, and nut. So second step, we're gonna go grab our rear base here. We're gonna line it up underneath the rear base stabilizer. Make sure you get it centered here on the 5000. It's gonna be 7 holes over. So kind of lift up on the rear base stabilizer a little bit to get it lined up. And I just wanted to mention too, if you're doing the 4000, to help position this rear base stabilizer, you can always throw this piece down first and set the rear base on top of it. That way you'll know how many holes you need to go up in order to install that rear base stabilizer. Grab a couple bolts for that. All right, next step, we're gonna come over here and grab our back rear base. And this needs to be connected to the guide rods here. You'll notice when you get your lat attachment that these bolts are gonna come pre-assembled in the guide rods already. So we're just gonna go ahead and take those out. There's gonna be a little washer with it. Sometimes that washer will kind of drop down in there and just pop it out with the bolt there. Take our guide rods here, insert them into our rear base. Take our bolts. There's a couple holes under here, you can see. We're gonna line up that hole with our guide rod. It's a little tricky. Thread it in. Get that with the next one. Thread it in. And on this step, we're gonna wanna go ahead and tighten these bolts, because once we stand it up, it's gonna be really hard to access these bolts. So we can go ahead and tighten these ones now. I got my size 14 socket for this part and ratchet. We'll just give those a little crank. All right, now we got our guide rods in our rear base. Now we're gonna come over here, grab a couple bolts, Gonna grab these two little short guys. It's gonna be a size 19, 2 washers with them, 1 per each. And we are gonna connect our rear base piece to our front base piece. So you'll notice on this rear base, you're gonna have the screw holes in one side. Just make sure those are facing forward. All right, now that we've got our rear base on, the guide rods attached, we're gonna come over here and grab these 2 rubber donuts. Probably come right in your little blister pack for the hardware kit. We're gonna go ahead and set those on. I'm gonna grab my step stool to reach up there. And you can just slide them over the bolts that are already pre-assembled in the top here. Not a big deal. Slide those all the way down to the bottom. And now we're gonna grab our trolley. This is what the weight horns are gonna be on. We'll install the weight horns next. Let's get this guy up and on. There's no front or back to this, so no need to worry about that. All right, got that on. Now we can go ahead and connect the weight horns to each side. So come over here to the hardware again. Bolts here with the tapered end. And it's gonna be the size 6 Allen key and a size 17 on the opposite side. There's 4 of them. We'll grab those, as well as our weight horns here. And as you can see on the weight horn here, this end is kind of tapered down. So that's gonna be the side that the bolt goes in. Bolt slide in from this side, and then we're gonna go flat washer and nut. Same goes for the bottom. You might need to slide the little bumper out of the way. Bolt from this side, washer, nut. All right, now that we have our weight horns on, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. It's gonna be our upper pulley beam here. If you haven't already, you'll need to remove the bolts up at the top of the guide rod, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that first. All right, now we'll grab our upper pulley beam here. As you can see, we got our 2 holes for the guide rods here, 2 holes for the logo plate cross member. Put it up over the top of the cross member. And the guide rods are just gonna slide into the holes, just like so. And we can go ahead and reinstall our bolts for the top of the guide rods. All right, we got our bolts in the top of the guide rods. Come back over here and grab the last 2 1-inch bolts. We're gonna install these at the top of the logo plate. All right, so we got our bolts here. We're gonna get this nice and centered. On the 5000 logo plate, it's gonna be 8 holes over to the first hole on the pulley beam. Or you can use the E on the logo plate as a reference. All right, now that we have the frame pretty much assembled on the lat low row, now it's time to do the cabling. So we'll come over here to our cables. Your lat low row should have came with 2 cables just like this. You'll notice a little bit of difference. You have a top and a bottom. The top is gonna have the bolt with the threads. The bottom is just gonna have this little end with the little eyelet and a ball on each of them. That's the same, so just pay attention to the opposite end. So we'll grab our top one here. So first we're just gonna route the cable through the holes on the upper pulley bracket before putting on the pulley wheels. And I just want to point out one thing, seen this a lot. The cable is going to go above the upper pulley bracket here. I've seen it where people route it in through this tube here. You don't want to do that because it's just going to shred your cable, so make sure that it's going up above this bracket. We're going to come over here. It's going to go through that front hole, up above the bar, down through this hole, You can just kind of pull it down for now and let it hang. Now we can go ahead and grab our pulleys. Bolts we're gonna need, one of these guys where the threads go all the way through, 2 washers and a nut, 2 of the longer bolts, bolt, washer, bushing on this side, washer and nut, 2 of those. And we're gonna use 3 pulleys for this step. So we'll just bring those over here for now. First step, we're gonna do the first pulley right up here. Got our pulley. This is gonna be one of the longer bolts with the bushings. So with this bolt, you're gonna take your bolt, and then you can see on the bushing, there's one flange side here. You're gonna have that facing the head of the bolt. Go ahead. We got our pulley here. We're gonna make sure the cable goes on top of the pulley. Put it up in here. Going to slide our bolt through. Take the other bushing here, well, you can see that. Put it in. That was basically just fill the gap. Flat washer and nut. All right, next, got it over the front pulley. Got it running above the bar. Got our second pulley here. Get the pulley, make sure the cable's going on top of the pulley. Bolt through. We're going to take our bushing here, fill the gap, and then flat washer and nut. We're going to move on to this pulley back here. This is going to use the short bolt with the threads that run all the way through it and 2 washers. Go ahead and prep that. So we got our bolt, 1 washer. We're going to take the cable again and make sure it's on top of the pulley. Slide it in between these 2 brackets. Pop the bolt through, flat washer and nut. There we go, we got our cable just kind of hanging like this. Eventually our floating pulley is gonna go here, but we can go ahead and connect the end of this cable down here to the weight horns. All right, we're gonna take the bolt here, thread it into the trolley. You don't need to thread it all the way in. I'd say about halfway is good. And then you can see the nut here. It's called the lock nut. We'll go ahead and crank that down, and we'll get a size 19 wrench and crank that all the way so it's nice and snug so that bolt's not gonna back out on you. All right, now that we have our upper cable routed, we're gonna come over here and grab the brackets for the floating pulley. It's gonna be these 2 guys here. You'll notice on these brackets, 3 holes at the bottom, 1 hole I consider the top. We're gonna go ahead and put the pulley in this top hole here using another short bolt. We are going to grab a pulley, the bolt through one side of the bracket, put the pulley on, put the other side of the bracket on. And just like that. All right, got our floating pulley here. We're gonna pull down on the upper cable, put the floating pulley in there, and it's just gonna kind of hang just like that for now. All right, now that we have the floating pulley in, we're gonna go ahead and route the bottom cable. So we got our bottom cable here. For this entire step, we're going to need a chain, 2 carabiners, 1 long bolt with the bushings, 1 short bolt, the 2 washers, and 2 pulleys. First, we'll go ahead and kind of put our lower cable in place. All right, so we got the end of our bottom cable here. We're gonna thread it right through here from the front side. It's gonna come up to the floating pulley. We're gonna grab a pulley and the small bolt cable is gonna be on top of the pulley. Come up here. Now you have 3 different options for holes here. Doesn't matter which one you use. It's all just gonna kind of determine tension, but you're able to do that with the chain at the other end, which you'll see in a little bit anyhow, so not a big deal which hole you put it in. I'm just gonna put it in the center for now. washer and the nut on. And we're gonna go ahead and pull it down here. All right, now we got our cable hanging here from the floating pulley. We're gonna grab our other pulley, the bolt, same as the top bolt, flat washer, bushing. Pulley in here, and this time the cable is gonna run underneath the pulley wheel. Get the bolt through, bushing on that opposite side, flat washer, and nut. All right, now that we have that pulley installed, cable's going up over top of that pulley, coming down to here. Now this is where we're gonna use our chain and 2 carabiners. So we're gonna connect 1 carabiner to the end of the cable. I'm gonna connect the chain to that carabiner. We're gonna pull it down here, and you can see that all the different links on the chain, and however you set it will determine the tension on the cable. Now you wanna make sure that the cable is fairly tight. You don't want, the weight horns to be floating a bunch or anything like that. Basically want it kind of at the base. Get that other carabiner, line it up, and just kind of see where your tension's at. So I'd say about 7 or 8 chain links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're on the 8th one here. I'd say that's probably about good. Good place to mount it for proper tension. You don't want too much slop on this cable, because you run the risk of the cable rubbing on the frame in places, and that's going to shred the sheathing on the cable prematurely. So just make sure you're tensioning it where it's nice and tight. All right, now that we got our cable routed, that's all good. We're going to move on to one of the last steps here. We're just going to grab our foot plate for the low row. So this is going to slide right in here. You'll see that these little plastic liners move. So when you're putting this in, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So a little tip is just kind of pull that out a little bit, pull one side out, get it in there nice and gingerly, and kind of push it in until we click in, and then that liner will slide back in as you do that. And then obviously you can adjust this in and out as far as you want for whatever workout you might be doing. And last, we'll take our little, we'll call it a lock screw here, thread it in on this side, and that's just gonna keep this plate from wiggling here once it's tight. All right, now that we have our foot plate in, now comes the fun part in tightening it all. So kind of just recommendation when you're tightening it, just make sure it's square everywhere. There's a little bit of play and wiggle room on the big bolts on both cross members, so it'll kind of shift to one side more than the other. So just square it up, make sure it's straight. Go ahead, crank everything down. And then the last step I recommend is silicone spray on the guide rods here. Just give it a little spray. Again, you can purchase this at any Home Depot hardware store around you. Only recommend silicone. I don't recommend white lithium grease or any of that, just because it kind of gunks things up. But the silicone's basically going to make that nice and smooth, keep this trolley moving up and down with ease. So every now and then, every, 3 months, 6 months, however much you're using it, give it a spray, and that's going to keep everything moving nice and smooth. All right, that completes the assembly for our lat low row on our PR 5000. Again, it's going to be the same steps for the PR 4000 if that's the rack that you own. And again, hope this video helps, and have fun.